the dark underbelly of Ecuador, one man rose from the dusty streets of Manta to become the most feared name in the country's criminal history: José Adolfo Fito Macías Villamar. To his enemies, he was a ghost, untouchable, unpredictable, and unstoppable. To his allies, he was the mastermind who turned Ecuador into a crucial link in the global cocaine trade. And to millions of terrified Ecuadorians, he was the man who made violence an everyday reality. Fito's origins were deceptively ordinary. Born in 1979, he spent his early years as a taxi driver, navigating the bustling streets of his hometown. But poverty and opportunity collided, and he was pulled into the world of organized crime. By the early 2000s, he was climbing the ranks of Los Choneros, a gang that would eventually dominate Ecuador's criminal landscape. Arrested in 2011, Fito was handed a staggering 34-year prison sentence for murder, drug trafficking, and organized crime. Yet prison walls were never meant to hold a man like him. Twice, he escaped, each time embarrassing the authorities and reinforcing his legend as a man who could not be caged. By 2020, following the assassination of gang boss Jorge Luis Rusquina Zambrano, Fito claimed the throne. Under his ruthless leadership, Los Choneros became more than a gang, they were an empire. They struck alliances with Mexico's Sinaloa cartel, Colombia's Gulf Clan, and Balkan mafias, expanding their reach far beyond Ecuador. Even behind bars, Fito lived like a king. His cell was a command center. He threw parties, had internet access, and directed nationwide operations with the push of a button. With his orders, Ecuador's prison system turned into a fortress of gang control, and the violence spilled onto the streets. Then came January 2024, a day that plunged Ecuador into chaos. Authorities were preparing to transfer Fito to a maximum security facility. But when guards arrived at his cell in La Roca prison, they found it empty. The nation's most notorious criminal had vanished. Within hours, Ecuador erupted. Prisons went up in flames as riots broke out. Armed gangs launched bombings and orchestrated mass jailbreaks. In Guayaquil, gunmen stormed a live television station, holding anchors at gunpoint in front of horrified viewers. A prosecutor investigating Fito's operations was assassinated. President Daniel Noboa declared a nationwide state of emergency, calling it an internal armed conflict. Ecuador had become a battlefield, and Fito was at the center of it all. For 17 months, he remained a phantom. His face was plastered on wanted posters, and a $1 million bounty was placed on his head. Rumors swirled. Some claimed he was in Colombia. Others believed he had fled to Argentina or Mexico. All the while, violence raged on. Entire communities lived in fear of reprisals, and even the police admitted they were outgunned. But Fito wasn't hiding in another country. He was right back where it all began. On June 25, 2025, after months of painstaking intelligence work, Ecuadorian special forces closed in. Their target, a luxury villa on the outskirts of Manta. Beneath the unassuming property lay a heavily fortified underground bunker with reinforced doors, surveillance systems, and escape tunnels. In a precise, lightning-fast operation, security forces descended on the hideout. Not a single shot was fired. After 17 months on the run, the man who had brought Ecuador to its knees was finally in custody. The images of Fito's arrest spread across Ecuador in minutes. To many, it was a moment of long-awaited justice. For others, it was only the beginning. Behind bars once again, there were fears that Fito's influence could still reach the streets. But this time, Ecuador had a different plan. In a historic move, the government approved Fito's extradition to the United States, a decision once unthinkable. For decades, Ecuador's constitution forbade the extradition of its citizens. That changed in 2024, when a national referendum gave authorities the power to send the country's most dangerous criminals abroad to face justice. On July 20, 2025, under tight security, Fito was escorted onto a U.S. government plane and flown to New York. It was a first for Ecuador. Never before had one of its nationals been extradited under the new law. For President Noboa's administration, it was a symbolic victory, proof that Ecuador would no longer bow to cartel pressure. In Brooklyn federal court, Fito was arraigned on multiple charges, international cocaine trafficking, firearms smuggling, and conspiracy to commit violent crimes. He stood before the judge and pleaded not guilty. But his history of escapes and his reputation for violence left no room for leniency. He was ordered to remain in custody without bail. If convicted, Fito faces up to 50 years in a U.S. federal prison. As required by Ecuadorian law, the United States guaranteed that he would not face a life sentence or the death penalty. Fito's extradition sent shockwaves through the criminal underworld. For decades, Ecuador had been a safe haven for cartel leaders who could run their empires from prison with impunity. That era, it seemed, was over. Yet the question remains, what happens to Los Choneros now? Experts warn that the removal of their leader could spark a bloody power struggle among rival factions, each eager to fill the void left by Fito's absence. For ordinary Ecuadorians who have endured years of violence, the fear of reprisals lingers. The capture and extradition of Fito Macías are more than just a headline. They represent a pivotal moment in Ecuador's battle against organized crime. It is a story of a man who wielded unimaginable power, of a nation brought to its knees by violence, and of the collective will to reclaim security and justice. Yet, as analysts point out, the war is far from won. Los Choneros remain deeply embedded in the drug trade, and corruption continues to undermine law enforcement efforts. Without systemic reforms, Ecuador risks falling back into the same cycle of violence that allowed Fito to thrive. For many Ecuadorians, the images of Fito in U.S. custody offer a glimmer of hope. For the first time in years, the man who once ruled from behind bars has been cut off from his empire. No more lavish parties in prison, no more orders passed through bribed guards. Instead, he now awaits trial in a high-security American facility, thousands of miles away from the organization he once commanded. But the legacy of Fito Macías endures. His journey from a taxi driver to the undisputed kingpin of Ecuador's criminal underworld stands as a chilling reminder of what happens when poverty, corruption, and organized crime collide. For Ecuador, his extradition is a crucial step forward, but it is not the end of the story. The battle against Los Choneros and the broader fight against drug trafficking will continue. The question now is whether Ecuador can seize this moment to dismantle the networks of corruption that allowed Fito to rise in the first place. Can the nation rebuild trust in its institutions, restore order in its prisons, and protect its citizens from the violence that has scarred a generation? Only time will tell. For now, the capture and extradition of Fito Macías stand as a historic milestone, a powerful message to the underworld that even the most feared criminals cannot outrun justice forever.